Good morning, everyone. Good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are, and welcome to this week's Weekly Energy Boost. My name is Elisheva, and I am here with David on this lovely Monday morning, and we are sharing with you today how to bring closure, how to end things in a spiritual, Kabbalistic way. And we're doing it this week because there is an energy of, I know it sounds so funny to say this, but the energy of ending, the completion of processes. We're actually on a week in which we're really, David referred to it a little bit at the end of last week's episode, we're finishing the energy that we downloaded last year and preparing our tank to be filled again with an energy that's coming up next week. We'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. But the idea is that the Kabbalists teach that we can use that energy, that support, to gain clarity about completing circles and cycles in our own lives. And we actually had a question last week, in the week that we had a Q&A episode. And one of the questions was about changing jobs, finishing one career path and moving to another one. And I thought it's really interesting that came up. I didn't think about it at the time, but that was a really perfect segue into understanding the spiritual approaches to putting things to rest. I also think that a lot of where people struggle is, did they make the right decision? If they made the right decision, why can't they let go of the memory, the hurt, the situation? And we're going to cover all of that on this week's episode. Weekly Energy Boost is a 7-day spiritual weather forecast in which David and I, and sometimes our guests, provide our listeners with the most powerful and practical tools to help you navigate the coming 7 days through picking through the wisdom of Kabbalah, its tools and its principles, and inevitably each episode offers invaluable life lessons that you can use at any time. And this week really isn't any different. And I'm sure when you even hear the phrase ending things or bringing closure, it's difficult. While things end in our lives all the time, it's more uncommon for things to end because we end them. And I want to distinguish between the two. There are things that run their course, right? People graduate, people, their lease expires and they move somewhere else, or, I used to be into one thing, now I'm into something else. Things sometimes age out or phase out. Really what we're focusing on today is when we need to make those decisions and the ramification of those decisions. For me, it's most natural to start with the emotional thing. I don't know if David, you want to take it somewhere on a different direction before we go there.
Let's start. I'll add.
Well, I think the first question that comes up, and again, we can talk about ending relationships, ending, quitting a job, getting out of a living situation, even going to rehab is a version of ending things. We break up with friends, if we're honest with ourselves. We might even end relationships that we have with family members. So how do we navigate our emotions in that process in a healthy way so that we don't hang on, right? I know we've talked about this in the podcast before, that sometimes people break up with their partner and they leave a little opening in case, maybe, as a possibility, there's a plan B, or if whoever I'm in love with now, it doesn't work out for them. If I don't end it harshly, maybe I can come back to this one. So I think a big part of the conversation needs to revolve around the emotional aspect of putting things to rest.
Well, first, there's a lot to unpack here. And first, we need to respect that every relationship we have in this world is a spiritual process. And it's a process that's given to us by the light of the Creator in order to help us reach our highest good. So whether it's a toxic one or a positive relationship, both of them have a right to exist for whatever reason and for however long. And so we need to first understand that macro spiritual picture. Everything is good, everything is meant to be there, and it's there to help me grow. I think the second thing is let me just share one more thing. I think a common trait amongst great leaders in this world, people who have a tremendous responsibility and have tremendous power.
You don't mean government. You mean like...
I even mean government.
Oh, you do?
I mean government, It can be spiritual, it can be physical, in the private sector, it can be business, doesn't matter. But when someone's leading a company, when they've been designated to lead, there's two qualities that every great leader has. Number one is they have vision. So they see something that other people don't see. And as a result, they can move the company forward in a way that other people cannot. Ultimately, that's what makes the difference between one CEO and another. It's the way the person can move everyone forward. But the second great quality of a leader is their ability to make decisions quickly, efficiently, without remorse, and to push forward. And also when not to make decisions and to stand by that. But what's amazing is there's no in-between with these great leaders. Whatever they do with certainty and they do with strength, which is an interesting thing to observe, because what we're learning here is it's not so much about the decision that you make that is right or wrong. It's the quality of the decision. The RE in the Gates of Divine Inspiration, on the first page, talks about 4 different levels of spiritual actions. And each level creates a spiritual angel or an advocate that supports you in your life. And it says that the stronger, the more pure the intention of the action, the more excitement behind the action, the stronger the action is, creates a very strong angel. Imagine like a warrior angel that is your advocate, that goes out there to support you in this world. However, let's say you do a positive action, but you kind of do it begrudgingly, you do it half-heartedly, deep down inside you wish you didn't have to do it, you're not that enthusiastic about it. It's still good that you did it, but the angel that is created from that is like a weak angel with like a limp. It's like a limping angel. So what we see here is 2 people who might have done the same positive spiritual action. One creates like the Navy SEAL of angels. The other one creates a limping, lazy angel. Both these angels go out into the world and create positivity for them. So you can imagine what kind of angels have we created with our decisions in this world? So many times we might make a decision but have so much doubt about the decision, so much fear, so much anxiety, so much worry. Maybe the decision was just done impulsively because we're so afraid. And I know people who just want to they want resolution. Let's just do something because I can't handle having this weighing on me or over my head. All of that's reactive, and all of that, what it does, it's not the decision that's right or wrong, but it's the consciousness around the decision that's causing the pain and the suffering, and the decision ultimately not to work out right. So I think it's very clear. If you're the type of person that is willing to make a decision with certainty, with excitement, even if it's the wrong one, but then stand by it, ultimately the miracle will work out for you. Our teachers, the Rav and Karen, used to say it all the time. They don't always make the right decision, but because of the certainty in the decisions they made, the light eventually made the decision curve to become the right one.
And that's I think that the element of, did I make the right decision? Did I not make the right decision? How do I know? And that constant questioning 20 years after the fact, 30 years after the fact, it's actually what we call a short circuit, meaning if it's already in the past, this is usually David's line, you need to know it was perfect. That's exactly how it happened to be. When the decision is in front of you, I think that one of the things that help people make that decision with certainty and with conviction is the mindset, the consciousness that, or I won't even define the consciousness, it's the mindset around end. Why do we have such repulsion about the word end, about ending things? And I can speak to relationships for sure, that relationships, the ones that the ones that are not forever, maybe we've even talked about this before, just because a relationship ends doesn't mean it's failed. And the Zohar gives a beautiful explanation of a story from the Bible to illustrate this. and I'm going to, without all the names and details or anything, there was basically a person who went through his own spiritual journey and was finally ready for his soulmate, but she was with someone else. And the Zohar talks about this, that if a person is, when they're ready for their soulmate to enter their life, if their soulmate is in another relationship, they'll either need to divorce or their partner will need to die. Now that's a very extreme statement, and the Zohar sometimes gets extreme. But what it really teaches us is that, sometimes you have an experience, I can tell you even for myself, right? There are often relationships where the other person suddenly becomes another person. You don't recognize them. You don't know what happened. And yet we can talk about there's no such thing as suddenly. But according to what the Zohar says, if a relationship begins to deteriorate, it's not necessarily anyone's fault or anyone is doing something wrong. It can be, and this is something so important to remember, not only in relationships, but we can even relate it to your career, your job process, is that if you are ready for your next level in a relationship, in a job, in anything, that current level has to fall away. And if you're not letting go of it, if you're not willing to let it end, that actually brings more pain and more darkness to the process. Now, that doesn't mean that, you have a fight and you walk away. That's it, we're done. But the reality is, I'll give you a job-related example. I remember working with somebody once who always complained about how much they hated their job. I'm sure you've seen this too, David. People who can't stand, I'm going to leave, I'm looking for something else, this is horrible, why do they treat me this way, this is not what I signed up for, and they talk about it, and they talk about it, and they talk about how they're ready for the next, but they don't do anything. What happens? They get fired. Because they put out this broadcast to the universe that we are finished, that it is done, that I'm moving on. But when our actions don't meet our desires, and this is the important thing to remember, when our actions don't match our desires, the universe takes action to match our desire. You don't want to be in that job? Here it is on a silver platter. You don't work there anymore. Go get that other job. But it can feel very abrupt and drastic. That kind of ending can happen in a relationship as well. When we're not honest about we're in the relationship for the wrong reasons, then it ends abruptly. We need to understand, and this is where the big shift this week is in consciousness, is that just because it's ended doesn't mean it's failed. And it can only end if I'm ready for what's next. That's really important to remember, and that can help shift you into that space of certainty that David was talking about. If you remember that the bottom of my previous level is where my next level begins, it can be easier to move through that closure process.
Another way of looking at the decision-making process, I wrote a post about this that I ended up not sharing because I thought it was maybe a little too bold, but I would say that if you enter into something, be ready to be the best at it and to finish it before you decide to leave it. And I'll share with you what I mean. I've learned that if I'm going to do something, I better be ready to be number one at it. And that's a very important thing, because the more times you come in second, third, fourth, or fifth place, you actually lose the confidence to continue to do other things. It's important that whatever you do, you are doing it at the highest level of accomplishment. So there will be projects that will come my way so many times, even in the Kabbalah Center. And I will ask myself, can I execute this project flawlessly, given everything I have going on? Can I make it the best? Can I be the best at it? And if the answer is no, for me, that's when I say no. I'll just say no. Regardless of what someone might think of me, regardless if they think I'm selfish for saying no, I know that I can't let you down. So it's very important in this world to get a track record of wins. For example, the government, the Department of Justice, when it comes to prosecutors taking cases, they have to analyze, if we're going to indict someone, are we going to win the case? A prosecutor is not going to take on a case that they don't think they can win. because no prosecutor wants to have a 50% success rate in the cases that they take. That's going to torpedo their career. In our lives, we take on so many cases that we know we may never win or complete. And that's why we end up with these tough decisions. Oh, should I stay? Should I go? The problem is, from the beginning, we didn't really go all in and commit to being the best, to being the best father, to being the best mother, to being the best partner. If you're in a job you don't like, my suggestion before you leave it is to be the best at it, then leave. Why leave when you're not good? There must also be a reason why you're there. Become very good at it, then leave.
Okay, but I want to ask you the opposite side of that question. What if you someone who works for you or someone you're friends with, you need to let them go? What if you're the one who's terminating? How do you know it's the right time or it's the right thing? I mean, of course, there's going to be glaring, if the person has stolen $2 million from you, I get it, it's time to go.
Yeah.
But there's sometimes where you realize it's not a good fit, they're not happy, you're not happy, expectations aren't being met. On paper, it looks like it's the right thing to do, but how do you know?
Yeah. I think we're all afraid to expedite the process of knowing. The best way to know is to have a discussion. Like we have a policy that if you have a problem with somebody in the company, you have 24 hours to tell them about it. And obviously you don't want to come reactively, but it's your responsibility to overcome your reactive feelings and communicate it within 24 hours. That moves the process along. If you have an issue with a friend, what's shocking is people have issues, but they haven't talked about it for weeks or months. And then there's
marriages as well. It happens. Marriages as well.
Marriages especially. I can tell you the counseling that we do in marriages, people married for 10, 15 plus years, and I'll be like, what do you want? And then the guy will say this, and she'll be like, well, you never told me that.
Right.
It's almost like, what, did you ask? No, I thought this is what you want. He's like, that's not what I want.
When's my annual review?
That's right. We have quarterly reviews in the company. We don't have quarterly reviews in marriages, and we need to have that.
Totally.
That's actually a great idea.
Well, there is a concept like that.
Quarterly review.
No. There is a concept like that.
In our quarterly reviews, you have to rate yourself before your supervisor rates you.
So
which is really powerful. I mean, I'm curious how people would rate themselves in the marriage. That's really
but this is the thing, is that I actually read, and my fault for not writing down who originated the idea, but it is to have a date night, to dedicate time in the evening at some point in the course of a month, and to really do that. Here's what's working for me. Here's what I'm proud of. Here's where I'm struggling. Here's what's not really. There was a set of questions that they said. It really was one of those, if you want to call it quarterly, but a review, an opportunity to express what you feel is great, express what you wish you could be better, and also to compliment the other person, meaning you had to do it for both of you. Sure. You had to say, here's how I see you struggling, here's how I see you shining. And to that point, I see that part of giving that 100% before ending something means that level of communication. You can never expect your partner to read your mind. You also can't expect your employer or your employees or your friends to read your mind. And many times the pain and suffering we put ourselves through is because of a misunderstanding or a miscommunication. It's not actually real. And we have the tendency to feed into a movie of what's going to happen if, or what happened when. When you put it out on the table, you verbalize it, it clears so much of the drama and the chaos and the baggage away. Sometimes that's why couples bring in a mediator, because it's hard for them to hash it out when it's just them, because it becomes tit for tat and they get defensive. It does sometimes help to have a third party, but that really looking at your relationship as a business is a way to assess, if we're bleeding out, why are we continuing with these habits or with these patterns? Let's work on it. I think another thing people ask us when it comes to ending things is there better or worse times, Kabbalistically speaking, to bring things to an end?
Are there better times Kabbalistically to bring things in?
Yeah, like maybe there's a time of year. I'll tell you what I remember. Years ago, sitting in a class with one of the senior teachers at the center, and them saying, this particular time period we're about to enter, in a couple weeks, it's a 7-week process where what ends up happening is, it's almost like, if I could give it the right metaphor, it's like a spiritual fog descends on us and we don't really see things for what they are. It's a period full of what David likes to call tests, but really to test our progress, our prowess. Have we really grown? Have we really strengthened our certainty, our consciousness, our practice? And I remember sitting in a class about this period, and the advice from that teacher was, if it came to you in this period to break up with your significant other, don't do it. Sit with it. Let this period end, and if it still feels that way in a month after, you have something to talk about. But because of the illusion that can present itself during this time, it's better not to make drastic moves in that period.
I think we have periods where we're advised not to make moves, but we don't necessarily have periods where you should make
There
moves.
isn't like a harmonious, beautiful time to put things to an end. No, I think, to that point, over the years, I've worked with a lot of people who have said they're waiting for the kids to go to college.
Before what? Before
they
ending the
break up.
marriage?
Yeah.
No, interesting.
And I know people who have also stayed in marriages for the sake of businesses. That while the relationship has dissolved, the legal status of the relationship doesn't end for the sake of the income or the marriage. And I think there's something to be said about that as well. One more thing I want to talk about before we end is, we also learn, if you realize that the end of your current level is where your next level begins, what consciousness, or how can we help shift from worry and regret to being excited and inspired when things end?
What do you mean?
What can I? Okay.
Give me an example.
I know somebody who is, it sounds so funny, but they need to move out of their home.
They need to move out of their home, okay.
And there's a lot of emotion attached to, their kids have grown up there and all these different things are happening there. And it's sad and it's painful and it's scary and they don't know what's next. They need to look for a new place, whatever. Things happen, life changes. How do we shift consciousness? How does that person, and you can apply that situation, a person knows their contract is coming to an end. Yeah. A person knows that they have to, I don't know, I know it's going to sound so funny, actually. I remember talking to somebody in the last couple of weeks that their best friend is getting married and they know that's going to change their friendship.
Yes.
So there is a kind of ending of, it's just the girls to now she's never going to be without, or most of the time at least, not going to be without her husband. So how do we shift from regret and sadness when something comes to an end into that space of positivity, certainty, and optimism?
It's hard to ask me that question because
you don't have a problem with that.
My Aquarius side's like, what's the big deal?
Right.
Just move on and experience the freedom of something new. But the Pisces side,
can I give you a more relevant one for you personally? And I've been thinking about this a lot the last couple of weeks. In the work that we do, people come and go.
Yeah.
And sometimes when people go, it's painful.
Yeah.
There's disappointment, there's hurt, and you're not always the person initiating the closure. It's the same. Obviously, the family that needs to leave their house, in that case, they're not choosing it. They need to leave for financial reasons to move somewhere else. So, how do you, in the midst of that hurt or that pain of leaving or breaking up or moving on, how do you shift from I'm hurt, that's painful, I didn't see that coming, to there must be something greater? In my head, I understand there's something greater. My Kabbalah teacher told me that.
Yeah.
How do I start to feel that there is something greater coming?
Yeah. That's a great question. I'm not sure there's a
one size fits all.
Yeah, I'm not sure there's a one size fits all. I can tell you what I do. I think over time, and I think this has been developed through experience of painful situations, I've learned to have a different kind of relationship with pain, and that pain is a good thing when it comes out of nowhere and you've done everything in your power to avoid it, of course, but when it comes, you have to embrace it and accept it and know that it is coming from the Creator, and therefore it must be good. Now that, what I just told you, I will package into a mantra that I will say 1,000 times a day. I've learned that my body accepts things when my mouth tells it what to accept. So I think the reason why some people take a year to overcome a painful situation, some people 6 months or a month, I've noticed that my process of transformation and seeing the good and literally experiencing the good in this physical world, so not just like in my mind, but seeing the manifestations of it, happens much quicker when my mouth tells my body what the truth is, which is pain is coming from the light. If this pain is coming from the light of the Creator, it must be good. Everything that the light does is good. The miracles are coming. This is good for everyone. I don't see the whole picture. So I'll say that out loud to my body until my body is so sick of hearing it, it acquiesces and it submits and says, you know what, fine, I will stop freaking out, fine, I will stop worrying about the future, fine, I will trust you, soul, and I will come along for the ride.
I was going to ask, the last question I was going to ask is, when the thing that you need to walk away from is a goal, a venture, something that you thought would be amazing, right? You're not walking away because it's just not working. And to me, it goes that description works better in a professional scope, although obviously it can work in relationships as well. But when you need to admit defeat, basically, what do you do?
I think that's also a powerful moment. There are times where if it's like feedback about you or your ego, you should take it all the time. Just take it, feel the pain of it. It's only good, move on. And it's a great lesson. It builds esteem in the eyes of others that you're open and that they can share with you. So that's one. I think when it comes to cutting losses short in your adventures, you have to be very sensitive and calculate and not be delusional about your situation.
Can I give you an example that may actually even help you?
Yes. I'll just say I know people who stay in stuff so long that it's like almost to a place of delusion. It's like holding on to a stock of a bad company because you've lost so much money, so you just have a hard time selling it.
So I want to give you a more human investment rather than financial investment one. I've met with people over the years that have gone to medical school, and no matter how many times they take the test, have not passed their exams. So they've put everything they have, money, time, lost sleep, giving up so many other opportunities on the premise that they're going to become medical doctors, and they can't pass the test.
Yeah.
How does one look at that as a blessing?
Yeah.
That's an example of something you put blood, sweat, and tears, and it doesn't grow, doesn't bear fruit.
That's a tough one. I'm not sure if it's about looking at that as a blessing. You should look at everything as a positive. But if I was put in this situation over and over again, I have a way, for me personally, I can't experience the same pain twice. I don't.
You're allergic to that?
I'm allergic to that. So I will keep increasing my intensity, using more tools, talking to more mentors, trying to extract more, praying harder. I will keep going to the point where, I don't know, I think we have endless capacity. So I'll just keep going, and I've seen that eventually something has to open up. So if someone is stuck and they're not moving, it's because they're not increasing their intensity behind either trying to find out or revealing the solution.
I think the last thing I would say about that is sometimes it's going to sound so cliche, but as an innocent bystander to so many of those scenarios, I see how often rejection is protection, and the universe is really holding their best interests in mind by blocking the particular path that they work toward and intended. So it's also important to recognize that sometimes when the end isn't coming from you, you're not the one initiating it, or it comes out of left field, often that block, that barrier that's been created is protection rather than rejection. So just want to remind everybody about this, the power of this week. We're also in those first 12 days of Aries, which you can read about on our website and our homepage, weeklyenergyboost.com. Every day has its own do's and don'ts, and it's really helpful to keep those things in mind as we navigate these powerful few weeks. Weekly Energy Boost is available on all podcast platforms, YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. You can also visit our website, weeklyenergyboost.com, where you can find out about all the things we mention in our episodes, as well as other interesting things we think would be good for our listeners to know about. You can donate on weeklyenergyboost.com to support our podcast. And as always, continue to like, rate, review, and especially share. I think that we all know everybody knows someone who's going through the end of something right now. And this episode hopefully will support and inspire and enlighten many people over the coming weeks. Have a fabulous week, and we'll see you next time on the Weekly Energy Boost.